This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. We begin today's show with this week's agricultural law update from K-State and Washburn University School of Law professor Roger McEowen. Roger discusses a messy situation that started with a producer defaulting on his loan and led to competition for that producer's profits between the original lending company and a rural bank. Roger explains where it all went wrong in this case that took place in Texas. As mentioned last week, we continue our stories highlighting water challenges in Kansas with K-State water specialist Jonathan Aguilar. This week, Jonathan joins us to talk through some of the diverse perceptions held by producers in the western portion of the state when it comes to the Ogallala Aquifer and its use. We end with this week's horticulture segment where KRSE horticulture agent for Johnson County, Dennis Patton, shares that as long as the wood is not frozen, fruit trees can be pruned from now through March. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are kicking off this Wednesday's programming with our K-State and Washburn University School of Law professor, Roger McEowen, joining us for this week's Ag Law Update. So, Roger, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Samantha.
Absolutely. Always great to have you in studio. And this week, we're talking through a bit of a messy loan situation.
Yeah, we sure are. This is a case that recently was decided by the Texas Court of Appeals involving a couple of lenders in northwest Texas, kind of in the Amarillo, Lubbock area.
From what I understand, a producer, sought out to borrow money, which is a normal thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of farmers borrow money as part of being necessary to run their operations. Not everybody can operate on a cash basis, just pay cash for everything as you go along. And so financing and ag operations being dependent on financing is absolutely critical.
Absolutely. And this specific producer, he sought a loan from AgriFund is the lender in this case, and it defaulted, right? And that's where this gets tricky.
Yeah, the primary lender of his farming operation was a company known as AgriFund, LLC. They're the plaintiff in this case, and they were financing the farming operations. And this fellow is a cotton farmer in northwest Texas, and AgriFund had secured their interest in his collateral, and that included his crops and proceeds thereof. So they're securing the cotton crop and the sale proceeds or whatever his proceeds are of that cotton crop. They have a security interest in it that is perfected, we call that, and they did that by filing a security interest with the Secretary of State's office. And that's a public record that's out there. Well, he defaults on that loan, and they had renewed notes and issued new notes over a period of time, but he defaulted on all of them. Well, shortly thereafter, within a couple of months, he gets another loan from a local bank northwest of Lubbock in a small town. And for whatever reason, the bank loaned him the money. And I still don't know the backstory behind this, whether they just simply didn't check the record and didn't find anything. If they did check the record, I have a suspicion that they just didn't check because they would have seen that AgriFund is already secured and that if he defaults on the bank loan, they're going to come in after AgriFund and may not get paid anything. So I'm still puzzled as to why the loan was made in the first place. But they did. They loaned him the money to buy the inputs necessary to put a cotton crop in the ground, and they took a security interest in growing crops and proceeds thereof.
So those same crops and proceeds that AgriFund had already had claim to in the first place. Mm-hmm. Messy situation. So now we have this rural bank and this other lender kind of in competition for what happens with this producer's crop.
Yeah, he defaults on the bank loan. So he's in default on AgriFund's loan. He's in default on the bank loan. And then he harvests the cotton crop and sells the crop at the local elevator. And the elevator is trying to figure out who do we pay? Because there are multiple creditors out there. So they write checks both ways. And AgriFund says, now, wait a minute. We have priority on all of this. We beat out the bank. And the bank came up with an argument that said that they had a priority position because they were a purchased money secured creditor. They had a PMSI, a purchased money security interest in the crops. And if that's the case, there's a rule. Actually, there used to be a rule that said that you could jump ahead of a prior perfected lender. So that was their argument, that we loaned the money, we took an interest in the inputs, we loaned it to buy the inputs, but that was going to become crops and proceeds thereof, and so therefore we jump ahead of the bank under this special rule.
And that didn't end up applying in this case, right?
No, that's completely incorrect. That's not right by the bank. Now, a purchase money collateral under Texas law means goods that secure a purchase money obligation incurred with respect to that collateral. So then what is a purchase money obligation? And we get into the weeds a bit because it's necessary to explain what Texas law says on this, and many states would be similar. A purchase money obligation is an obligation of an obligor incurred as part or all of the price of the collateral or for value to enable the debtor to acquire rights in the use of the collateral if the value is in so fact used. Okay, so what does that mean? That basically means that if I buy stuff from a business that finances the purchase of the stuff that they're selling to me, yes, they get a purchase money security interest in that. Okay, so if he buys cotton from the bank and the bank loans him money to buy the bank's cotton, then the bank has a prior perfected security interest in the cotton and the proceeds thereof. Banks don't sell cotton. They provide lending of funds. And so the statute, by definition, is not securing goods that the bank sells. And that's the purpose of a purchase money security interest. So, if I'm a farmer and I'm up to my eyeballs in loans and nobody's going to loan me money, but I need one more loan so that I can buy inputs to get a crop in the ground so I can generate some income to pay off my indebtedness. You see the vicious circle you can get into here. Then I can have a lender who sells that stuff to me to finance the purchase from them. That's what a purchase money security interest is. So the bank is claiming here that they had a PMSI because it had perfected a security interest in crops to be grown, which met the definition of goods. So they said, okay, by statute we can finance goods. Goods are crops to be grown. However, the statute also said it has to be a good in existence at the time the security agreement attaches, basically meaning in this instance when the loan is made. When does seed become crops? Well, no sooner than germination.
Sure.
And he hadn't even planted the crop at the time he took the loan out. So you don't have a good that you're securing at that point in time. So none of that argument made any sense. The bank ends up losing their interest in this. AgriFund comes first. Now, there was one avenue left here. Texas does have a statute. It's a lien statute, and it says if you get a lien in certain situations, you can be on equal footing in this instance with AgriFund, and that is an ag supply dealer lien. And a lot of states have those statutes. Those came in the 1980s during the farm debt crisis, and it basically comes back to that situation I just highlighted. If I need a loan to get a crop in the ground, nobody's going to loan me money because I'm in debt to everybody. If I go to a supply dealer can get a statutory lien in the funds they loan me to buy the inputs from them. It's kind of like the PMSI and crop rule, which was repealed, by the way, in 1999. So what the bank was arguing here, there is no PMSI and crop rule in Texas. It's gone. Iowa has what's known as an Appendix 2 version that they put back in, but Texas does not. So there is no PMSI and crop rule. So what the bank should have said when the debtor came in, when the farmer came in, was, look, we won't loan you the money because we see AgriFund's interest is out there and they're superior to us if you default. But here's this other statute that's in Texas. If you can go find an ag supply dealer that can sell you the seed and the chemicals, they can get a statutory lien that will put them on equal footing with AgriFund. They might loan you the money. That's what should have happened in this instance.
Absolutely. Yeah, if we could go back in time, I think that producer would have opted for that decision too, because the outcome of this has been very messy on all party sides.
Well,
right?
It's really bad for the bank because the bank lost its interest, and they're going to get beat out by AgriFund in this instance, and that's what the court said on appeal. Yeah, AgriFund is prior. Bank, you are unsecured, and so when the dust all settles in this, the bank's probably going to get nothing in return for that loan.
So a series of unfortunate events that led to a big mess. And you've been communicating that with students this week as well, haven't you?
Yeah. In fact, for the K-State students, I just covered this about 10 days ago and talked to them just earlier this week that, look, we've got something live here. This is why this is important. You have to pay attention to this as a lender. I said, some of you are going to end up, after you graduate, you're going to be working for a lender. You're going to be working for a private bank, a national bank, some type of ag credit, or you're going to be in farming. You need to know how these rules work so that you don't create a major mess, which is what happened for the bank in this instance. And this was a rural bank.
Well, Roger, I know that there's a lot more to this story, too, that we didn't get to talk through, just a lot of weeds to get through. So if producers are looking for more information on the story, where can they find that at?
They can find this on my blog, which is washburnlaw.edu/Walter, and then you can scroll down and find the link to my blog. It'll also be posted on K-State's Ag Manager website.
Wonderful. Well, I'll be sure to share the link to both of those listings there if you're interested in reading more about this case specifically. But Roger, as always, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Samantha.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was K-State and Washburn University School of Law professor Roger McEowen joining us for an ag law update and a messy bank situation. We're about to cut to a short break here, but before we do, attention all cotton growers in Kansas. The 4th annual Great Plains Cotton Conference will be held on February 28th in Pratt, Kansas at the Pratt 4-H building. This year's agenda is packed with great presenters and will feature new products from the industry and a marketing panel discussion. The presentations are directed towards both established and newer cotton growers in Kansas and Oklahoma and is an opportunity for all of those that are involved in cotton production in Kansas. Registration will begin at 7:45 a.m. the day of the event and will conclude at 5 p.m. CCA credits will also be offered and lunch will be provided. More information on the 4th annual Great Plains Cotton Conference being held on February 28th can be found in the show notes of today's program, which as always can be found on agtoday.net. Be sure to check it out. If you're listening to us on the radio and are afraid you're going to miss out on our next segment because you're reaching your destination or have something else that you're having to switch to quickly here, don't forget the Agriculture Today programming is also available as a podcast. Our podcast is easily accessible on all podcasting platforms, including our website, agtoday.net, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. You can simply search us on any podcasting platform, Agriculture Today, Kansas State, and we are more than likely to pop up and you can follow us there. That way you can simply have us pop up in your regular feed on whatever platform you're using and listen to us more regularly that way. Once again, you can easily access that on agtoday.net or any podcasting platform by simply searching Agriculture Today, Kansas State. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by Jonathan Aguilar. He is our K-State water specialist, joining us for a conversation on water use perceptions in Western Kansas. This is a part of that series that we're doing once a week on water topics especially. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us for this.
Yes, it's been a good day. We're still at the moment that we are talking here, we are still in need of moisture in our region. But hopefully things will turn around and we will not be talking about drought, but more on the resources that we have, which is the water that in that area.
Absolutely. So you recently were a part of putting together this large survey that analyzed perceptions of producers in Western Kansas specifically, trying to understand what producers' thoughts were when it comes to water issues in that region of the state, especially important right now, right?
That is very right. So I just want to recognize the big work here was actually the team of Matt Sanderson, our sociologist, and he was very influential in making sure that this report goes out also to the public. And right now it is part of our KRSE bookstore series. And I will share later on the bulletin as we move forward. But again, just want to recognize the work that has been done by Matt Sanderson and his team to be able to come up with this survey. But we are very grateful also from the technical point of view on trying to understand what the perception of the producers in our region. I live there and I interact with this producer, but I only hear a snippet of this conversation from time to time. And so coming up with this big survey of more than 1,000 people that they sent it out and responded is really nice to really gauge about their perception on a more personal level and trying to figure out from the sociology point of view of what are they thinking? What are their perceptions about groundwater conservation? Are they happy about it? Are they responsible for it or something like that? Or are they even thinking about it in the future? Is it more for a personal gain or for a community gain? So this particular survey has tried to understand those perceptions of these typical questions that we usually have.
Absolutely. And starting off some of the perceptions that were collected through the survey, there was the recognition of the importance of the aquifer as a resource, right, and its conservation.
That is correct. And it is very real in some of the survey results is that it's definitely a big resource for that region, and they recognize the importance of this aquifer, both for their personal gain in terms of their livelihood. Remember that these are farmers, and these are their livelihood, and they live and breathe on this resource. So this is their livelihood, and they recognize the importance of it. But more importantly, they were also concerned about their community because this water also supplies the livelihood for the rest of the community. So they were also concerned about this resource in relation to their community. So they're not just only thinking about themselves in terms of their livelihood, but also in the health of their community as moving forward, because they recognize that if the water is not there, some of the businesses are not going to thrive. Some of the basic necessities for the communities are not going to be funded or are not going to be satisfied just because the water also brings along some of this economic prosperity in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, important to recognize for sure. And across the board, I guess producers also had different ideas on how to best manage this water, right?
Yes, I think they do have also an idea of how to best manage that water. And I think one thing that I heard from them is that they are already doing something. And I think I could attest on that on some aspect, because we know that over the years, in the past 20, 30 years, most of the irrigation system has already transitioned from flood irrigation to center pivot. So more than 95% are already center pivot. So that means that we have gained efficiency. So a typical flood irrigation would be about 50 to 65% efficient. Now, when you're talking about center pivot, you are talking about 80 to 90% efficient. So we know that they have already made a big stride in terms of conservation, but also in the idea that they are doing something else with the water. So they think that they are already doing something on water conservation one way or another. And it's really nice to hear also that point of view from the producers.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're already taking it into their own hands, trying to make a difference even just in their own day-to-day operations without already having restrictions or anything put in place.
Yeah, that is correct. That is aside from programs that the state has been offering them from all throughout the years. So we know that they are doing also their part on that aspect. But going back again to my technical point of view, is that enough? Mm-hmm. I think is the question right now. Maybe from the technical point of view, they probably are maximizing the technology, but the technology is not the only piece in the puzzle. It's one of them, but there might be other options. And I think that's where the KSRE comes in, is that trying to figure out the other pieces of the puzzle in order to make them more efficient and conserving the water more.
That's KSRE's role really in this, is helping producers adjust as these things change, as, you know, even if political climate changes. That's our role. Is we're not there to put legislation in place. We're there to help producers in any way that we can when things change.
Yes, that is very true. And so the reason for this survey is just trying to understand the perception of the farmers. We would like to understand them, because if there is going to be any program, if there's going to be any help, or if there's going to be any policy that needs to be laid out, we should also understand where they are coming from. And it is best to be able to put those programs and activities out in alignment to what they are thinking. So if they think that they are doing something, then let's try to understand where they are coming from in that aspect. And if they think that they really recognize the value of the water, then let's put some emphasis on that aspect.
Absolutely. So moving forward from here on out, in terms of what KSRE really is going to be doing with these producers, what are some of the solutions to these perspectives, these issues that producers feel like they're currently facing?
So that is a very good question. And I think this survey doesn't really address the solutions on that one. What we were trying to address with this survey was trying to understand where they will be coming from if we are going to lay out some of these policies and some of these programs and some of the help that KSRE could possibly offer to the producers. So that is the main focus of this survey so far. And so the survey is out there in our KSRE bookstore, and they could look at it and understand where they're coming from. Because another thing that I would probably offer is that there's several perspectives that a person could look at this. They could see this. They could see some opportunities. They could see some challenges in the way that the producers have answered the survey.
Absolutely, yeah, and such a diverse set of views too. And we think about the diversity of Western Kansas and what our producers are actually going through. There's a lot of different perspectives on that.
That is correct. And so that's the reason for the survey, is trying to really understand their perspective. So going back to probably some of the highlights is that, first of all, they recognize that the water is really important and that they should conserve the water for the future of their own livelihood, their own family, but also more importantly is the livelihood of the producers. However, they are probably not in concert or probably in the same room as to how to do it. So that's probably where we could possibly come in and figure out, or probably help them thresh out the ways that we could possibly move forward. The resource is still there. We still have time to probably be able to turn this around. Again, going back to the idea that we have learned from the past that there are some solutions towards this similar kind of situation. And so we are not yet late in terms of making this turnaround.
Some optimism to end our conversation here. And Jonathan, I know that there's a lot of hard feelings around some of these issues, but KSRE is really here to help make the most of it. And I think that's a testament to the work that you do and the work that all the rest of our members here at KSRE do in terms of water usage. So thank you on behalf of everybody out there that utilizes you guys as a resource.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share this information, and let's have more conversation about this one.
Absolutely. And everyone, I will link to the survey and the results of the survey, all of the data that was collected that we've been talking about today. Once again, these were just the highlights of that survey. There's still so much more that you can read into, and this wonderful 12-page document pretty much that puts together everything.
That is correct. It's a 12-page, but there's a lot of graphs and figures and tables. We try to make sure that you won't be bored in reading this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very visually appealing and easy to read through. So some great information there. If you are interested in checking it out, once again, those will be in the show notes, which can be found on agtoday.net. But Jonathan, thank you so much again.
Thank you again.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was K-State Water Specialist Jonathan Aguilar joining us for a conversation on some data recently collected on water use perceptions in western Kansas. Before we cut to a short break, I just wanted to plug for another great event that is coming through K-State Research and Extension. KSRE will be hosting an online agronomy series called Crop Talk. It's slated to begin Tuesday, February 7th through Tuesday, February 28th, and will highlight several important topics for crop producers. These will be on Tuesdays, and each session will be held from noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. Planned topics of discussion include spring annual forages to fill the gap in cattle feed, climate-smart agriculture, and corn tillers, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You can register online now at www.northwest.ksu.edu/events/. Or you can call the Cottonwood Extension Office in Hayes. The number to reach them is 785-628-9430. Once you register, a link to the online sessions will be emailed to you. Along with all of the links we just discussed and the phone numbers you can call, we'll also link to this program in the show notes of today's show, which can be found on agtoday.net. Once again, we're cutting to a short break, but we'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. Well, as long as the wood isn't frozen, fruit trees can be pruned from now through March. K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent for Johnson County, Dennis Patton, covers some of the general recommendations for pruning fruit trees. Dennis, we don't always think about Kansas and fruit trees, but really there are quite a few varieties that we do grow in the state, and part of that is having to prune those fruit trees, and I guess now we're coming up on the time when we should be doing that, or at least thinking about it.
That is 100% correct. We think about pruning fruit trees late winter, early spring, before growth begins, so we can get in there and see the branch structure of the trees, because pruning or growing fruit trees is really all about getting light penetration into the tree, because it takes good sunlight to hit those developing fruit to get those big, plump, tasty fruit. So late winter, when the tree is bare, is the ideal time to get in there and start pruning.
And I guess the pruning process kind of follows any type of pruning. We want to start first off with some of those broken or damaged branches?
That's correct. I think the way to approach any pruning project is first to just kind of step back, look at the tree, kind of get your overall vision kind of for what needs to be done. And then, let's borrow the phrase, you start with what I call the low-hanging fruit. So the low-hanging fruit are going to be those branches that are damaged, broken, maybe causing a hazard, if you're out in the garden walking around, they may be low, hitting your head when you go to mow, those type of things. So start by removing dead, broken. The other things we want to remove are crossing branches. So you've got two branches that are rubbing against each other. That's going to cause damage. We want to alleviate that. And then the next, what I call low-hanging fruit, to borrow the pun when it comes to pruning fruit trees, is any branches that are growing inward into the tree. Because here again, our goal, no matter whether it's peach, cherry, apple, we want to open that tree up to get that sunlight into the tree itself.
The cut itself, how should we be making the cut?
We're going to recommend the same type of pruning cut we do for whether it's an ornamental tree or a fruit tree. We're going to want to look for what's called the branch collar. So if you look where there's a crotch or fork in that tree, you're going to kind of see a little raised ring, a little wrinkled ring, where bark's kind of protruding upwards, and that's called the branch collar. And that is where the cambium growth layer of the tree is and where the plant's going to heal itself or recover quickly from the pruning. So we want to make the cut just to the outside of that kind of raised ring branch collar, because then that's going to stimulate that tree to then grow, fill in, and seal off that wound made from the pruning cut. And one other thing, too, question comes up all the time is after we make that cut, do we put some sort of wound dressing, pruning sealer on it, those type of things? And the answer is no. We just leave it open and let the tree, let nature seal off that wound by making the proper cut itself.
You mentioned taking kind of a closer look at the tree, and really what we want to make sure we're doing is that we're not taking too much of the tree out?
That's correct. When we prune, we want to probably remove no more than 1/4 to maybe 1/3 of the total wood on that tree itself. If we over prune our fruit trees, what tends to happen is it stimulates a lot of vegetative growth, what we call sucker growth, which is also something that should be removed. And that wood usually is going to be non-fruiting wood, and so we want to avoid over-pruning those trees.
Also want to mention the fact that the International Master Gardener Conference is coming up. It's a theme of Celebrate, Educate, Grow, and that will be in June in Overland Park, and I know you've got a big part to play in that. And we really just want to remind people that the website is up and registration is open as well.
That's correct. Thank you. Yes, it's International Master Gardener Conference, imgc2023.com. K-State and our Johnson County Extension Master Gardeners are hosting this biennial conference. As of today, we have over 700 people registered from 44 states, Canada, and England. And we have a garden tour, a trade show, and speakers open to the public. It's probably the biggest gardening event ever to hit the state of Kansas, with 5 keynote speakers, over 40 presenters from about 20 different states, 13 published authors, world-renowned plant explorers, and we even got the horticulturists from Kew Gardens in London, England speaking.
That's K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent for Johnson County, Dennis Patton. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.